This is Hunter Muse
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening.
to The Melt.
Cool. Well, since this is your first time on the Melt, maybe give a little background information for people who may be just now coming upon you.
Okay. I've been a hypnotherapist for over 31 years, and in that time, I've completed over 15,000 therapy sessions. So I've been around for a long time. I specialize particularly in regression because I find that's for me, the most powerful form of therapy that is available for anybody on earth. And I particularly specialize in past life regression. I've written and had 2 books published on past life regression, and it's the sort of thing that I'm internationally known for. I have clients in 24 countries around the world, and most of the work I do is about helping people with issues that are holding them back in their lives and blocking them from living their lives freely. So that's basically a very simple summary of who I am and what I do.
Sure. How did past life regression sort of come on your radar? How did you hear about it?
It was very strange, really, as professionally, because I obviously had known about reincarnation for a number of years. Because first of all, when I was about 15, I fell upon the concept of reincarnation, and suddenly everything in life made sense to me. At that stage, being on Earth in this asylum didn't make sense in any way, shape, or form, and suddenly the concept of reincarnation made a lot of sense. I subsequently became a practicing Buddhist for a number of years, and was practicing Buddhism very seriously for a number of years. The concept of reincarnation didn't scare me. I understood it quite
Sure.
deeply.
Mhm.
But as a hypnotherapist, I hadn't trained in past life regression because in those days, in the early 1990s, it wasn't very well known, and there were very few people doing past life regression around the world. Um, so I was a standard hypnotherapist. My work was really about taking clients into trance and then using what we call post-hypnotic suggestion therapy, which is basically the concept of that is to reprogram the client's inner mind, the subconscious mind, so that they stop doing the wrong things and start doing the right things, you could
Sure.
say.
Mhm.
And that was working relatively well. And then maybe 6 months, a year into my practice as a therapist, a young man came in to me with a severe anxiety state, and he was about 24 years of age, and he sat in front of me in my office. And in English, the phrase we have, he was a bag of nerves.
Mm.
He was shaking, he was breathing quickly, he couldn't sit still, he was moving all the time, he was stammering his words out, he was so tense. And it was a really severe anxiety state. So, and he said, I can't even go to work anymore. I've had to give my job up. I now just sit at home all day shaking. The doctor's given me medication which doesn't work and actually probably made it worse, as it
Sure.
often does.
Mm.
And he said, my wife said, if I don't get myself fixed, she's going to divorce me. She can't live like this anymore. I just don't have a life anymore. So I said, well, one of the questions we ask as therapists is, how long have you had the problem for?
Mhm.
And he said, well, I've always been a worrier. Even as a child, I was a worrier. But since the children came along a few years ago, this has got worse and worse until now I'm just in this awful state all of the time. So I asked him if, had anything caused it? Have you had any major traumas in the last few years? Nothing at all. Because obviously, as a therapist, you don't catch an anxiety state. It's not caused by
Yeah.
sitting next to somebody on the bus and you catch their anxiety state. It's not like
Sure.
flu. But there was nothing that he could hang his hat on. Okay, I said, well, let's do some hypnosis. So I gently guided him into trance. And remember, trance or hypnosis is you could say, a form of relaxation. And within minutes, he'd really relaxed right down. His body slumped in my reclining chair. His breathing was slow and deep, and he looked just so wonderfully relaxed. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is working. And then, be ready for this. I will actually underplay this because otherwise it might break the microphone. But after about 10 minutes, all of a sudden, he suddenly became very tense and his body stiffened. And then his hands started to shake. And he started to look around. He was in trance and he's looking all over the place. He said, no, hide, 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 quickly in here, hide the children, quickly, they're coming, no, hide, quickly, shh, quiet. Then there was a pause for a few seconds, and all of a sudden, he started to scream and writhe and yell, no, not the children, no, ah!
Wow.
And I'm sitting there with my hypnotherapy script thinking, what the?
What have we opened up here?
Absolutely. So I said, what was happening? And he was just completely calm again. He said, that was weird. He said, it was like I was in another body, in another time. He said, I was a man and soldiers were coming, Nazi soldiers were coming for me and my children. And we were trying to hide them with my wife. And then they came in, they found us in a room and they murdered us. They shot us all to pieces.
Wow.
Was he still hypnotized at this state?
He was, yes. He was still in trance.
Okay.
So it's a great question, actually, Hunter. Yes, he was. He was still in trance. I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I feel absolutely wonderful. He said, I am completely calm. I have never, ever felt this calm in the whole of my life. I thought, well, I don't. I said, okay. He said, what was it? What was it? I said, I think you've been in a past life. I said, obviously it was a death in a past life, but how do you feel now? He said, I feel completely calm. So I continued with the session, just did some more gentle relaxation, brought him out of trance at the end of the session, and his problem was completely released. It was completely healed in those 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I thought, why don't I know about this? Because this is very significant. Now, basically, he had spontaneously regressed into a death in a past life. So I then started to look at ways of finding out more about past life regression. And there is an American Past Life Association. I contacted them. I got some scripts from them and then started to develop working with it little by little. And then over the last 30 years or so, I've developed a regression system which I've created, which is very refined. And it's almost like laser therapy, where with my client's subconscious, in most cases, when they come with an issue, not only can we find what caused the issue, but also, where is the best way of healing it?
Mm.
Because in regression, there are 3 different areas that we work in. I think we'll probably talk about these as we go
Sure.
through the discussion. So it was just remarkable. I mean, and I thought, well, this is incredible. He's healed. He's better in 10 minutes, and that lifelong problem has just gone completely.
Wow.
So, and that's the first of hundreds, I don't know, thousands of amazing experiences that I've experienced in my client sessions over the years.
It's amazing.
It's quite extraordinary, and it took my breath away. Now I'm used to it. I mean, not all sessions are as dramatic as that.
Sure.
But we do occasionally have these sessions where clients are writhing and screaming and yelling as they relive the trauma from the past. It's often death trauma in past lives,
Sure.
but not always. Sometimes it can be the loss of a loved one or the end of a relationship in a past life where we didn't see it coming, and that often you'll find a relationship issue in this life has got past life connections as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because as you probably know, the concept of reincarnation is we have these clusters of souls, soul groups, people or souls who reincarnate with us over many lifetimes, and some of those are closer to us and some of them are further away from us. And obviously people who are closer to us in terms of the soul cluster, they tend to reincarnate with us at a closer level, i.e. family and loving relationships, etc.
Did you have subsequent sessions with him, or did he? That was it. He didn't need any more.
Didn't need any more. No,
Wow.
completely fixed in one session. And that occasionally happens. I mean, I wish it happened every time. I'd be a millionaire. I'd charge a massive amount for fixing people in one session. But some people need extensive therapy. For some people, having said that, extensive therapy to a regression therapist is not what extensive therapy would be in the US for people who go and have psychoanalysis, because as we know, that can go on for years. Whereas regression therapy tends to be much more radical, and it's several sessions, 10, 15, 20, 25 occasionally, but it can be 2 or 3 sessions, but it's not hundreds of sessions in most cases.
Sure.
In most cases. I've had 2 or 3 clients over the years who have needed several years of regular therapy, but their issues were very deep-rooted.
Sure.
I wonder in his case, how, like, if you could look back on him, check in with him and see if he had any other experiences like that, or if it was cleared and he was able to maintain his relationship and maybe not feel that anxiety around his children.
To be honest, we just knew it'd gone. We just
Mm.
knew it was fixed. Simple as, when I asked him to think about, his children, when I asked him to think about his family, when I asked him at the end of that session to think about the anxiety, it had just simply dissolved away. It just didn't exist
Amazing.
anymore.
That's incredible.
It seems like you would, by reopening this wound that obviously was not completely healed, and then going back into that trauma, you think you would almost make it worse in a sense by re-exposing it. But what do you think it is about that process, about reliving that somehow
Yeah.
brings closure?
It's a good point, and there is a possibility that trauma can be re-stimulated if you don't work with it correctly. And by don't work with it correctly, what I mean is the therapist doesn't take the client through the trauma in enough depth. So the regression model is that all of our issues as human beings, and I mean all of our issues, come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. So what we're aiming to do is, in most cases in regression, to release those traumas wherever they come from. And it's important that they are fully released so that we take all the energy out of them. And the analogy I tend to use is that we all have an emotional pressure cooker, a pressure cooker. I'm sure you're old enough to remember pressure cookers.
Oh,
At
yes,
times.
absolutely.
um, and within this pressure cooker is all the emotional pressure, the stuff that's building. And what it does all day long, that pressure in our pressure cooker, emotional trauma, it bubbles and bubbles, and we react to that pressure in different ways. So
Mhm.
remember, when you hear a pressure cooker, it'd be bubbling away and the pressure would be coming out of a little hole.
Yeah.
What we do, we react to that pressure with all the issues that we have. So for some people, they may react with depression. For someone else, they may react with panic attacks or phobias. For someone else, they may have skin problems. For someone else, they may have physical issues. For
Mhm.
someone else, they may have a lack of confidence, etc., etc., etc. So all of these issues this is our way of reacting to this inner pressure.
Mhm.
What we're doing in a therapy session, regression session, is to, in trance, take the lid off, because there's a depth to doing this in trance.
Mhm.
We take the lid off, we let some of the pressure out, and we put the lid back on again. And at the end of the session, the pressure has dropped.
Mhm.
That space is healing. Now, it could be then that the client experiences some relief for a few days from the issue before the pressure comes back up again. And we do another session back into the past, release the trauma, take the lid off, let the pressure out, put the lid back on. Over time, the pressure drops and drops and drops. And the key to this is having the courage as a therapist to actually let the client relive the trauma more than once.
Mhm.
Because if a client has, I mean, we see lots of tears in this work. It's not fun. It's very deep. It's incredibly powerful, but we see a lot of emotion coming through. Some therapists aren't comfortable with that. And so what they tend to do is try to get people out of the unhappiness or the
Mhm.
sadness or
Yeah.
the shaking. Sometimes the body can be shaking in a session while it releases the trauma. And that can scare the hell out of some therapists. And of course, a lot of therapists like to be in control. Well, in this case, the client's subconscious is controlling the session, so you have to trust it.
Mhm.
If you let the releasing go, if you take the client back several times through the death, it will drop the pressure in that death or in that trauma right down, and then it's neutralized.
Mhm.
It's gone. So it cannot be re-stimulated because you've released all of that pressure from that trauma. So as long as the job is done correctly, I mean, I run a past life or a regression training course, which is a 4-day long training course. There are some so-called therapists out there who will train in past lives in 1 day. You can't learn this in 1 day.
Mm.
It's just too deep. So for me, the aim is to train therapists to be courageous enough to take the client back and back and back over and over until the energy is completely spent, and then they're completely better.
It's interesting because it seems like every person's reaction to the therapy is so individualized, because one person can experience a traumatic event and maybe it doesn't create that much pressure, but for someone else it would be life altering and life changing. So what I like about this is that it is so um central on that person and their experience, and it's not really a one size fits all training modality.
That's wonderful. Yes, absolutely. We say it's client led. It's led
Mhm.
by the client, but ultimately it's led by the client's subconscious.
Mhm.
Now, our subconscious mind is our all-knowing, all-wise part of the mind.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, after so many years doing this work and with all the sort of spiritual stuff I've done over the years and practices I've done, I actually now believe we have a higher self.
Mhm.
And to me, our higher self either is our subconscious or is intimately connected to it. So when we're working with the client's subconscious, it has this awesome wisdom. And if the therapist can let it come through and get out of the way, then it does the work for us, you could say.
Mhm.
So with my system of regression, I use a technique we call an idiomotor response technique. What does that mean? Well, once the client is in trance, I ask the subconscious to come through into a hand or a finger, and to make one of the fingers move all by itself. Let's say sometimes it's a hand, but
Mhm.
let's just say it's a finger. And this happens just independently of the client. Most of the time, my client is laying there in trance with their eyelids closed, and this finger's moving, and they're thinking, "What's this going on
Mm.
now?" Weird. And there's so many at the time, so many of them at the end of the session say that was weird. And what I ask the subconscious to do is just give me yes, no signals. So whenever the finger moves, it says yes. If I ask a question, it says no. It doesn't move, it means no. So then all I'm doing is asking yes, no questions, open
Sure.
questions. I'm not
Yeah.
leading the client,
Mhm.
because
Right.
I'm very unhappy with therapists who lead clients and implant things. It's
Yeah.
wrong to do that.
Sure.
Um, so I'll say to the client's subconscious, let's say my client comes with a depression, and I'll ask the subconscious, so depression, by the way, is caused by locked in anger.
Mhm.
It isn't caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yeah.
That's a medical lie that was created by drug companies in the 70s to sell
Mhm.
antidepressants.
Absolutely.
It's an emotional state in these cases. So what I'm asking the subconscious is the roots, the emotional causes of the depression. Where are the traumas in the past that have locked in the anger? And the reason, and by the way, anger is what we call a composite emotion. So underneath anger, there's always sadness. So this is why depression is characterized by melancholy,
Mhm.
the sadness underneath the anger. I'm asking the subconscious, whereabouts in the past have the emotional traumas taken place connected to causing the anger and the depression? And I ask, are there any traumas in this lifetime, at any time in this life? And we may get a yes for that. Then I'll ask the subconscious, whereabouts in this life? There are 5 areas of life. Traumas can take place in adult life, in adolescence, in childhood, the time of birth can be very traumatic, or pre-birth in the womb. So what I'm asking there is, whereabouts have the traumas taken place in this lifetime? Second question is, are there any past lives causing and if we get a yes, I'll ask how many past lives, and I'll just count 1, 2, 3. Okay, we've got 3 past lives to work in. And the next question is, are there any ancestral traumas that you've inherited from any of your ancestors in your bloodline, from parents, grandparents, great-grandparents,
Mhm.
great-grandparents? Can go a long way back. And what I've then done, I've got a diagnosis exactly of what we need to do. I mean, my client has probably been to doctors dozens of times over 20, 30, 40 years and not got an answer.
Sure.
Now, in 10 minutes, they've got an answer. Oh, it's from my childhood, and also there's a couple of past lives.
Mhm.
And then I always ask, is it okay for us to work on this stuff? And if the subconscious says yes, then we start working and we go back into regression. Not everybody can regress, it has to be said, but most people can. And for those that can, they get these incredibly powerful results. Can I give you a good story from one of my clients just at the moment?
Please do.
Please.
Because I work with a lot of physical issues. And I have a client who's in Utah, actually, somewhere near Salt Lake City. She's a lovely lady. She's had severe back problems for about 15 years. And the back problems got so severe that she's been having a lot of surgery on the spine, on the back.
Mm.
Of all of the vertebrae in her spine, there are only 5 vertebrae that the surgeons haven't touched.
Mm.
They've worked on all the others. She has a lot of the vertebrae are fused together now. They're fusing together. She's got some sort of electrodes in the back to try to remove the pain or reduce the pain.
Jeez.
The doctors don't know what to do. She can't go back to work. She works from home, laying on her back a lot of the time.
Mm.
She's unable to stand for more than 2 hours at a time. Her life has just fallen apart. Her husband, they have no family life. Her children, she can't do anything with them. And the doctors just don't know what to do anymore. They've just given up. She's on a cocktail of medications which are not really
Mm.
working. And the pain in the upper part of the spine, the thoracic spine from up to the neck, is just excruciating most of the day. And her subconscious has indicated that the roots of this are in emotional traumas. So in our very first session, she went back into her grandfather's life to release some trauma from her grandfather's life. And it wasn't fun. It was very unpleasant trauma that he was going through from his childhood. But she felt marvelous at the end of the session. Most of these sessions, people are in trance for about an hour with me. She felt wonderful at the end. The pain was much, much better, and she was much calmer. And then I saw her 2 weeks later for the second session, and she looked like a different person. The pain had dropped from 12 out of 10, 10 out of 10 to 4 out of 10. She felt massively calm. She was able to walk around and move. She'd even spent 12 hours at a music festival a week earlier without any side effects afterwards.
Wow.
We then did another session where she regressed back into her adolescence and released some adolescent trauma. And I saw her again last week. The pain is way down, maybe 2 out of 10. It's a dull ache now. And over the previous 2 weekends, she had spent 1 full day working, doing housework without any after effects. And then the next weekend, she spent 2 days doing housework without any ill effects at all. So
Wow.
she's amazed. I mean, for her, this is a miracle. And, you know, I'm just looking forward to the day when we've finished all the therapy. I'm not sure whether we can fully heal the spine, and because of obviously she's had surgery, but I know that I'm guessing that she'll be 80% better at least by the time we've finished. And I'm just looking forward to hearing her story of what she says to her doctors to explain why she's so well.
Yeah, and why she doesn't need any more prescriptions for all of that horrible medication.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Sounds like she needs some healing surrounding the surgeries.
Yeah.
Could be. Actually, it's a good point, Hunter. She even woke up during one of the surgeries.
Oh,
Wow.
So there's some trauma
God.
there, because
So
that's traumatic.
did some of this trauma directly have to do with her back or her spine, or is that just where it was stored?
That's a great question. Not so far, but last year I was working with a gentleman in his 70s in the UK who had a lot of lower back pain, and he was really struggling, in pain all the time. I guided him back into one of the past lives that was causing this. And in the past life, he was a soldier in battle, and he was stabbed in the back. He was speared in the back and died. So we released that trauma. Back pain just went. You know, we tend to, we do tend to hold trauma in particular parts of the body that relate to the wounds in past lives. I mean, years ago, I had a female client who came to me, a lady who was, she'd been given 6 months to live as a result of a very aggressive liver disease, a rare liver disease. And she came to my office. She had to be helped up the stairs to my office with a couple of people. She looked like a stick insect. She could hardly eat. She was sick most of the time. She laid on the bed in pain most of the time. She was doped up to the eyeballs on morphine as a desperate attempt to take the pain away. And it was quite an amazing story, really. I mean, we did a lot of therapy together. She'd had 2 past lives which were connected to causing this liver disease. One was she was a Native American squaw who was killed in a raiding party by another tribe, and another a Native American brave came up behind her with a dagger and stabbed her in the back and killed her in the past life. And of course, it went right into where the liver is. And in the next past life, she was a young Polish teenage boy in the Second World War who was bayoneted in that area by Nazi soldiers and then dumped into a river to die. So we did that, and we did other stuff, releasing trauma, etc. We even then, I mean, this is taking things quite amazing. We even did surgery without any anesthetic,
Mm.
major surgery, because she was getting so strong as a result of the therapy session. She could eat. I mean, within a week of the first therapy session, she was no longer on morphine. She didn't need it anymore.
Mm.
The pain levels were dropping. The tumor stopped growing on the liver. But we couldn't get rid of them. So the surgeon who she was with in the local hospital, he wanted to do an operation which he'd done twice previously, disastrously. And he knew now she was strong enough to take the operation again.
Mhm.
And with this operation, she had to, before the surgery, she had to drink a dye,
Mhm.
which would then allow the surgeon to see up on a screen what was happening in the body while he was tinkering
Mhm.
around down there. And she's highly sensitive to virtually everything. So she spent all of the surgery retching and vomiting, because they couldn't really anesthetize her because she's very sensitive to anesthetics.
Mm.
And so, of course, the surgeon's trying to do delicate surgery with a body that's moving all the time.
Yeah. Wow.
After the first surgery, he actually damaged the liver itself.
Mm.
And the second surgery damaged the gallbladder, so she had to have a gallbladder removed.
Mm.
And both times she was in hospital for a week and a half or so after the surgery. So when she turned up in my office one Monday morning and said, I spoke to the surgeon last week and he'd like to do the operation again, suddenly these words came out of my mouth. I said, well, we'll do the operation in hypnosis. Who said that? Where did that come from? And she said, oh, that's great. I'll have a word with him. And the surgeon was so desperate. Yes, we'll try this. So I turned up at the hospital, got all the cap and gown and all the
Mhm.
gear on, and got to the operating theatre, and my client is laid on the table there with all the lights and all the machinery and the staff, all the theatre staff around, and the surgeon. The anaesthetist was standing there like this. She was not very impressed because she was useless because I was going to do this in hypnosis. No anesthetic to be used. So I guided her into trance, and the surgeon began the work. To cut a long story, the surgery, which the previous times had taken 2.5 to 3.5 hours, this time took 90 minutes.
Mm.
She
Wow.
wasn't sick once. She didn't move once. At the end of the surgery, it took 90 minutes. The surgeon said to me, I am absolutely astonished. I have never seen anything like this in my life before. He said, you must give me one of your cards. We must talk about this. Well, I'm still waiting for that phone call 25 years later. But that lady is now 25 years past her die-by date.
Mm.
Wow. That's fantastic. Man.
So, we're working with the mind. The mind is possibly the most powerful thing on earth. If we can use
For
it in the
sure.
right way, we can do all of these things. Now, okay, that wouldn't work for everybody. I'm not pretending that everybody who comes to see me has these miraculous results. There are some clients I can't help at all. But I've been around a bit, and so I do have a pretty good success rate.
That's outstanding. What are different ways that past life traumas can manifest in our current life? Physically is one of the ways.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
very much so. Yeah.
Spiritually, mentally, psychologically.
Yeah. So I tend to suggest that virtually every issue that we go to the doctors or the therapist with has its roots in past traumas and very likely in past life traumas.
Mhm.
So relationship issues, we've been around each other many times. So it may be you're having difficulty with your spouse or mother at the moment. Client may go back in trance to a past life where your mother was your mother in the past life and she killed you or she was hideous to you. And what the client then realizes is, well, there's no wonder my mother doesn't like me now because in the past life we didn't get on. She was horrible then. Or I killed my mother in the past life. No wonder she
Yeah.
doesn't like me and it won't want me at
Yeah.
all. So a lot of relationship issues have roots in past life traumas. phobias are just, I estimate 60% of phobias have their roots in past lifetimes. And there are phobias for virtually everything on Earth, from the common phobias, flying, etc.,
Mhm.
and emetophobia, which is a phobia of sick, to really wacky phobias. So, did you know there's a phobia for having peanut butter stuck on the inside of the roof of your mouth?
I did not.
Yeah, it's got one of those really long names that
Of
phobias
course.
always have.
Yes.
The strangest one that I came upon, the BBC contacted me actually, who wanted to discuss a lady who got into the national press, and they wanted to ask me my opinions of it. Her phobia was a fear of the holes in the center of donuts.
How odd.
So if ever she saw a donut, she would flip out and have panic attacks. So
Interesting.
it wasn't one of my clients, but yeah, phobias. I mean, I had clients with flying phobias are quite interesting because they are usually connected back to flying in a past life. So
Mhm.
I had a client years ago. She was a nurse and she came for therapy with a flying phobia. And she relived a past life in the Second World War as an English fighter pilot
Mhm.
who was shot down and killed. And of course, that was not fun. It was unpleasant, but we released the trauma. The phobia completely cleared, and she went on holiday without any fear at all. I write on quite a few phobias in The Power of Past Life Regression, actually, in the
Mhm.
second book, because I think phobias are very interesting. I had one lady who was in the Vietnam War in the past life, and she was a male American soldier who was in a very rickety old sort of plane flying over the jungle when the Viet Cong fired at the plane and blew it and shot at it and with missiles, whatever, and it crash landed. And first of all, there was the terror of thinking he was going to die as the plane came down.
Mm.
Actually, they managed to get into a clearing and they survived the crash. But then they had the second fear of being in the middle of the jungle, trying to get back to base, knowing that at
Yeah.
any minute they could be killed. So there was all of that trauma. So
Mhm.
although he survived in the past life, that was the trauma. So that trauma had come into my client in this lifetime and was still there.
Mhm.
It had sort of connected to planes. Uh,
That makes sense though, because some phobias seem to come out of no place. Like you have no rational reason why you would be so afraid of spiders, for instance, if you didn't have a past bad experience or something. So that makes total sense to connect it to something from a past life altogether.
yes, yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. And then emotional traumas, so lack of confidence, low self-esteem. I had a young lad, a young gentleman years ago. He was about 18 and he just started working in a local office, his first job. And as he sat in front of me in my office, he never made eye contact. He was just always looking away and talking down.
Mm.
And he just said, I just lack confidence. I've been like this for years. He said, I've always been a bit shy, or a lot shy as a child. But and at the office, they all think I'm weird. He said, if they talk, I sit on my own in the corner. I don't involve myself with all the conversations. If anybody comes with a file for me to work on, I look away as they pass it to me. And he said, they all think I'm weird. He said, I'm not weird. I just feel really scared a lot of the time. And a
Mhm.
lack of confidence is always caused by fear. Because when we're working in regression, we're working on any one or more of the 5 root negative emotions. I call them roots because they're like roots that go down into the ground.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the roots go down and then the problem grows up. So a lot of therapy is about chopping the weed down.
Mhm.
And that can be successful, of course, but sometimes the weed grows back
Exactly.
if you just chop it, or if you don't grow it, if you don't chop it enough, it grows along and comes out in a different way.
Yes.
So, for example, skin problems are caused by locked-in anger. All skin problems are caused. There are not many absolutes in my world, but all skin problems are caused by locked-in anger. That's
Hmm.
psoriasis, eczema, etc. So let's say you're working with depression as a therapist and you chop it down a bit, and the depression goes, but the roots are still there. It may come out a few months later that the client gets skin problems.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're doing in regression is we're digging out the roots, and there are 5 negative emotions, which shall I test you here what they are? No, anger,
Anger.
sadness, sadness, fear, anxiety, and guilt.
Mhm.
Guilt is a forgotten emotion.
That's a big one.
So this lad, basically lack of confidence, locked in fear. So I guided him into trance after we talked about things, and his subconscious took him back into a past life. And he then relived being executed in front of a crowd of people who were baying for his blood and his friend's blood. And it was maybe 300-400 years ago, in sort of medieval England or whatever. And he'd done something wrong against the local baron, people in charge, and they thought he was the ringleader. So before they executed him by chopping his head off, they made him watch his friends being put to death, and then they killed him. Now, in the session, he was very unhappy in that session. It really wasn't. It wasn't nice for him. And he kept saying to me, I don't really want to do this. And I said, well, we're going to do it. I'm sorry. You're in there now. If I pull you out now, you're going to feel awful for weeks. So we must go through this. And thankfully, he trusted me. We released the trauma. And he was very shocked at the end of the therapy. And he said, well, I don't believe in past lives. It doesn't matter. Your subconscious took you there for a reason. If you want to believe that was just a metaphor that your subconscious was created to heal you, then that's okay. It doesn't matter. And he came back to me a couple of weeks later. As he walked in my office, he was a different person. His head was up, his shoulders were back, total eye contact. And he said, I cannot thank you enough. It's been like a miracle. I am a totally different person now at work. All of that fear has just gone from my body. I just feel so much more at ease in situations. So, that's the lack of confidence. Guilt, I mentioned guilt. Most sexual issues have locked in guilt causing them. Most, not all, but most of them. So, we're aiming to release the guilt that may be at the heart of the sexual issue. So, you name it, see any issue will have its roots in the past and almost certainly in past lives.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned something that really struck me when you were talking about the healing of trauma of family members, that energy can come through you as well. What are your thoughts about the concept of cellular memories? So we are storing our experiences in the cells and the experiences of our ancestors, of maybe even all of humanity. Is it necessary for us to have this soul family cluster relationship in order to heal, or could we potentially be healing the relationship or the trauma of someone that we don't know?
Well, there's a few there's a few
Yes.
questions there, and some of that's a little existential, so I can't give definitive answers.
Of course.
But what I will say from my experience, and I'll answer you in different ways if that's okay, Hunter, as best I can. First of all, the only part of regression that has been scientifically proven is ancestral regression. Ancestral trauma is passed down. It seems to be at a genetic level, but actually it's more than a genetic level. There's also an energy to it. And they've done tests on rats, I think, and mice, and they've proven that this comes down through the genes. So if a person is traumatized in their life, if they don't release the trauma, there's a possibility they can pass it down to subsequent generations. So what we're aiming to do in regression is to go back into the ancestor's life, where whoever that is, it may be a grandparent, a great-grandparent, etc., etc. As a rule, it's not more than 7 generations back, as a rule. And I think shamanically, they often talk about ancestral stuff going back 7
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah, you're right.
Before that, it seems to clear itself in some way.
Hmm.
So what we're doing is going back with the client goes into the ancestor's life as though they are the ancestor.
Mhm.
So you go back and relive your mother's trauma, your great-grandfather's trauma. The number of times over the years my client has experienced this, something they didn't know about the ancestor, and they've, after the session, spoken to the mother or grandparent, and they've said, "How on earth did you know that?" "Yes, that's exactly what happened to him." "How did you know that?" So that's basically how that works. Now, how this is sort of stored, yes, on one level, it is like a cellular memory. It's a genetic thing in most cases.
Mhm.
But I have had quite a lot of sessions where it seems to come down from the ancestor like an energy.
Mm.
So how this works, let's say we're working in great grandfather's life on his traumas, and maybe there's not much trauma, but we actually go into great grandfather's death.
Mm.
Now you can think, how does that death trauma get passed down to my client? Because it's this sort of death trauma, but it seems to still be able to be passed down. So the client experiences it as an energy. Because you'd think, well, hang on, the trauma should have taken place in in grandfather's life before they had children,
Right.
because that's how it gets passed down through the genes.
Sure.
Mhm.
So how is it his death, which has taken place after his children have been born, how
Mhm.
does that cause a trauma? Well, in that case, it possibly isn't genetic. In that case, there may be some form of energy that we just do not understand that is passed down through to
Sure.
the generations.
Yeah, I totally believe that.
Now, as to, I mean, the subconscious is vast. I mean, there's a few questions here. Are we healing those ancestors by doing this work?
Mhm.
Because, we don't understand the concept of time. There is a possibility of that.
Mhm.
Although I do tend to say, so let's say my client is experiencing their mother's trauma and mother is still alive. My client will say, well, is my mother going to heal? Because am I healing her?
Mhm.
Well, there are two schools of thought. I know some therapists who will say, yes, your mother will get some benefit from this.
Mhm.
But my belief is we all have our own original pain work to do.
Mm.
So I believe we all have our own work to do on our own emotional stuff. So we need to do that. We can't just rely on somebody else to do it.
Mhm.
Although, having said that, in the last couple of years, I've been experimenting with a new aspect of regression, which not many people sort of know about, and I don't think anybody's really doing this, which is to actually do what I call surrogate regression.
Mm.
So, which is where I regress my clients into somebody else's life to heal their life, not
Hmm.
my client. And how this happened, I've got a wonderful hypnotherapy friend in Ireland, and she called me one day. She said, I don't know if this is possible, Burgess, but I've got a dog. I've just bought a dog recently, and she's wonderful. She's a rescue dog, and we're
Mhm.
incredibly close. And I do feel that she's what I call these spiritual dogs. It's as
Mhm.
if some animals have a big spiritual soul. They
Mhm.
understand. I mean, years ago, I had an English setter who didn't understand anything. He was just,
Sounds like
just
our pugs.
yeah, he'd run into parked cars and things like that, chasing parked cars. Um, but there are some animals, and she'd had a dog like this years earlier in New Zealand when she lived there, and it understood, it knew, it was almost like a healing dog. It had a healing presence.
Mhm.
I have a colleague in Norway, where I've been running training courses in Norway for many years, and a colleague over there, she has a dog which she takes into her therapy sessions with her because it has a healing energy. So my friend in Ireland said, she's a wonderful dog. She's so intelligent, but she's an absolute pain in the ass. She just is she will not do what she's told. And she said she follows me like around the house like a shadow. She says, at times I'll be walking one way, I'll suddenly walk the other way, and I'll fall over the dog. She's at my feet. And she said, we love her to bits, but there are times when I could really throttle her. She said, we know that she's a rescue dog, so she's probably got some trauma that she's been through. Is it possible, because me and the dog are really very connected, for you to regress me to heal the dog's issues?
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but we'll give it a crack because this is unusual. I mean, I've done most things over the last 31 years, and this is new. So we did, as I said, I do all my sessions online. So my client left the dog downstairs in the house, out the way, so the dog couldn't hear anything was going on as she was in her bedroom. I guided her into trance, and her subconscious, using a finger, indicated that the dog's traumas were coming from past lives and from this present life. And my client then regressed into a past life in which my client was a Nazi guard in a prison camp in the Second World War. So she was a male Nazi guard, and she had a dog as the guard dog. And the dog was obviously the dog now. Now, what this Nazi guard did, spent all day long just touring the perimeter of touring the perimeter fence, holding this dog on a leash, looking for breakouts and trying to stop breakouts, etc. And what happened in the past life is this Nazi guard had a conscience, as so many of these poor people did who were forced to become Nazis. He wasn't happy with what was going on in the camp, and he actually helped some of the inmates to escape. But they found out it was him, so immediately they just took him out and shot him and killed him. His dog was bereft. This dog has been living 24 hours a day with him for months, if not years, and suddenly its owner is dead. It's completely it's bereft. Really very unhappy. So we did that session. My client was pretty, surprised at this. But she said, "Do you know, Burgess?" She said, I've now realised when I take her out for walks in the Irish countryside, we go walking through the fields." She said, all she wants to do is walk around the outside of the fields where the hedges are, and she spends most of her time looking through holes in the hedges onto the other side. The dog was continuing this pattern of being a guide dog. We did a session a couple of weeks later. There was an immediate, significant improvement in the dog's behavior in those 2 weeks. She said she's no longer following me around. She feels much calmer. She seems to be happier. She's doing what I ask her to do. There's been a significant improvement. So we continued. We then did another past life, and this was even more of a weird past life because my client re-experienced a past life as an extraterrestrial on another planet. And the dog and her were two of these extraterrestrial life forms. And they'd been away, or they're like on a mission, I think like military, on a spacecraft for a long time. They came back to their home planet to find it was completely deserted, not a soul there. And it was like the Marie Celeste, there was not a single soul there alive or in any way, couldn't find anything. And then suddenly this weird alien gas appeared from nowhere and asphyxiated them both and killed them both.
Wow.
So now we cleared that past life. We also did some work with the dog's life in this life where it had been hit by its owners and beaten. And again, after that session, she reported back a few weeks later, she said, I went downstairs after our session, Steve, and she said, all evening, our dog was in such joy. I have never seen her so happy. The rest of the evening, after we did that session, and bear in mind the dog is in a different part of the house, so there's no placebo. It can't hear what my client is telling me. And the improvements have been enormous, absolutely enormous. So I started to think there's possibly a way that we can do work on ourselves for somebody else.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah, great.
Super, super, super wonderful. What a interesting, fascinating interview.
Fascinating subject. I mean, it's really astounding that this is not something that's more popular and widespread. I guess because, I mean, as we've talked about many times, we live in a materialist society that doesn't really believe much past the physicality of existence and what can be weighed and measured. So it would also make sense that those same folks do not believe in past lives. Um, so that's probably the major reason this isn't more widespread. But it seems like amazingly helpful and successful work therapy.
Yeah, I think that it sounds like some of his clients have gone through many, many different uh, therapeutic modalities, healing modalities, using pharmaceuticals, surgeries, and have been unsuccessful. And so for some of them, it seems like this is kind of the last stop because they've
Mhm.
tried everything out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that there's probably a level of desperation for some people who go into his sessions and they just want to get better.
Mhm.
But some people, it seems like they have just I would be curious to find out how people find out about him. Like
True.
the gentleman who was extremely shy, how did he end up in his space?
Mhm.
That seems like someone like that would be hesitant to do any type of therapy like this.
Well, you mentioned doing a session on TV at
Mm.
one point. I would imagine he
Oh,
gets some sort of coverage that way.
yeah.
But his book, at least the book that I read or that I had him read to me, was generally, it wasn't trying to explain how this works, how it happens, why, the what fors. It mostly was recounting experiences that he's had with people
I love how you said had him read to me, like he read it, like, online to you.
on the phone,
That's
actually,
really
while I was at
sweet.
work. Steve, can we do chapters 3 through 4 today?
And I
But
was so fascinated by what he said about depression
mhm,
being locked in anger and sadness, and it so resonates with me and so true how these things manifest in emotional state and emotional baggage, and also in physical state, like the skin is locked in anger.
yeah.
It's really, really intense because I think of skin issues that I've had in different parts of my body and how that relates to uh, trauma that I have, like why there were certain places where I had skin issues. Those were places that I had physical trauma
Mhm. Well, I have
or
current
emotional trauma.
currently have skin issues, so I don't think that I'm seething with rage inside, but perhaps I have stored up anger about things that have happened to me long, in my past or in my past lives for that matter, or who knows? Who knows? But I plan to find out. I definitely would like to do at least one session with him and
Yes.
find out what's going on.
For sure. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Mhm.
I've had those experiences with other people before, and one I had with someone that you've had on the show before, that the session lasted 3 hours,
Mhm.
and it was really, really intense. But I feel like I feel more connected with Steve, and, like, not that I feel like he's more of a professional than this other person was, but I feel like he has more of a handle on doing this specific type of work.
Yeah, for sure. And he seems very grounded too.
Totally,
Yeah.
and I could see, folding this into, my own therapy
Mhm.
practice and how powerful that would be, because I feel like a lot of people that go into psychoanalysis, as psychoanalysts really go into that in earnest. They really want to do the healing, and they wanna help people, but I think the unintended consequence of that is that you're talking about a long game. So that could
Mhm.
be 10 years of doing therapy with one person, and maybe that person doesn't feel or get any better, but you've built a new house or you
Yeah.
have a boat now, or
Yeah.
so it's like, is that really helping
Exactly.
the bigger picture? I like this idea of being able to do the work and not only healing, what's happening on this level of consensus reality and consciousness, but actually going back and doing healing of something that happened in a previous existence.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It seems extremely effective and it totally makes sense. It just so much about it makes sense. Because, I mean, first of all, you've got to run into a guy like Steve in order to even realize that this modality exists. But, that had to have been much, much harder in past lives, like in the World War I. How many people were doing past life regressions? Like, was it something that was even talked about? Probably in much smaller circles than today. So it's it's great that somebody like him exists. I'm sure many more like him exist, but that we can help to spread the word about this, because it seems like, again, whether you don't have to believe in it. He doesn't have magic powers. Like, this is something that you could learn in 4 hours, he said, right? 4 hour sessions or 4 sessions. Um, so it's totally accessible. It's not something mysterious. It's not something that only a cloistered group of individuals knows about. So anybody can learn to do this.
Well, the 4 number was doing the training, the
That's what I mean.
regression therapy 4 days.
4 days, 4 days.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I really felt so much just curiosity about the animal,
Mhm.
that whole animal aspect, and so interesting that so many people generationally are dealing with Nazi Germany, World War II trauma. Totally makes sense.
Yeah,
Completely makes
for
sense.
sure. For sure. And I think it was interesting to hear about people that were incarnated or had past lives in on other planets in other forms. I
Yeah.
wanted to dig more into that, but it was, there's so many things to ask about that just kind of got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to kind of dip into a little bit more, that we glossed over a little bit, was why it's only 7 generations.
Mhm.
And when he said it clears after or before 7 generations, like, what is his opinion about why? Why
It's
does
the
it clear?
it's the karmic statute of limitations. um, there's that stupid woke uh, uh, healthy label, that we've gotten the laundry detergent. It's seventh generation or whatever. That's a thing. That's like a something taken from the indigenous peoples of some land. Said something like, think think 7 generations out or something like that. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what happens after that. Maybe it's a cycle. Maybe something changes after that, or lapses, or
Yeah, I was
transforms into something
really
else.
super curious about that.
Yeah.
And I liked the being able to heal animals, like
Mhm.
that surrogate regression. I really got into that. That
Which
poor little doggy.
which dog were you thinking of ours that you would like to do that? Which one first?
Well, I mean,
Bowser?
I feel like our dogs, like, we definitely have some intertwined karma
Mhm.
with our dogs. Definitely, I feel that with the dachshunds, that I am communicating on a different level with these dogs. They're not just dogs. They were sons of mine or daughters of mine, or somehow we have some other enmeshed relationship. What's so interesting about the pugs is I feel that about them too, but I don't know what your connection with them is, because it's so weird how they came into your life, and it's so weird how, like, when I came into your life, I will never forget this. They were asleep on the couch in our old house. And when I walked in the room, they both looked up at me like, thank God you're here. Like they were so excited to meet me and see me, and their energy was just like it was like it woke up. So there's definitely some bond that all of us have.
I would like to make it clear that prior to her arriving, it wasn't like I was beating them or anything like that.
No, no.
It was more like I never connected with these dogs.
They were shut down
Yeah.
emotionally.
We just don't have never gotten each other. Like, you know, ideally with a dog you have, or with any pet really, I guess, you have an interaction where you actually have a
Totally.
relationship with them.
Totally.
Like
Yeah.
there's a give and take, and there's a
Yes.
communication, and it's a two-way street. I never felt like I had that with the
Yeah.
pugs. It's
So-
like they didn't know how to play
Yeah.
or anything like
Yeah.
that.
So I just went to someone's house that has two kind of our dream dogs. Two, even though I love our 4 dogs,
of course,
they have two black labs that they got from the Humane Society. And
is this today?
Today. And this gentleman told me that when he and his wife went to go get a dog, they were only going to get one dog, and they walked in and they saw these 2 little black labs, and he said immediately in my mind, he said, we're getting 2 dogs, because they were litter mates and they were just enmeshed, and this is what was going to happen. So he brought the dogs home. Now, these dogs are huge and they're happy and active and engaged. And I was so interesting, because when I was in the situation with these dogs, the people were freaked out. They were like, our dogs jump on you. And and I was like, I'm very dog friendly. It's fine. And within 10 minutes, they're both laying at my feet, totally conked out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, these are the dogs Chris wants.
Exactly.
This is the dog energy Chris wants. These dogs have larger brains. They're more engaged.
That's a big plus.
They're farm dogs. They're out and in and out of the house.
I like dogs that look like the lights are on, that there's somebody home, and that they actually realize I'm there.
Yes.
Besides when I'm depositing food to them,
Yeah.
and that there is, there's a connection. I don't
Yeah.
think that's too much to ask for, but I don't think I'm sensitive enough to them like you are. You can connect to them.
Totally.
You have much more of your field of empathy spreads much farther
Yeah.
than mine does.
Well, I just feel like I have a other sense when it comes to animals, that I can read an animal. I feel more connected to animals than I allow myself to feel to most humans,
Mhm.
because I'm such an empath that if I hook in with a human, I feel like I take on their karma, like I can absorb their energy. Where dogs, I feel there's a symbiotic thing that's happening, that we're working together on a psychic or a spiritual level.
I had a dog like that too. But I think that also I have an on and off switch with animals sometimes, because I had a lot of traumatic experiences connected with pets when I was growing up. A lot of really like having something sitting on the top of the lid that I had a guinea pig in, like an aquarium or something like that. And it was loose or something, so I put something heavy on top. The lid happened to move somehow, and the heavy thing fell on the guinea pig, who was still alive but had a broken back. And just escape hamsters that I found later bloated in a bucket of water, and just
oh my God,
all kinds of really horrible stuff like that. So I think I can unattach from animals maybe easier than I should be able to, but that doesn't apply to all animals. I mean,
you may have 12 guinea pig spirits attached to you.
I might. And hamsters.
And that could be the anchor.
Mice too, all small rodents. That's most of my traumatic. I had a dog that was a puppy when we got him, and he, we kept him in the basement, which could have lent to him being so vocal all night long, and woke up one day and my dad had taken him out to the countryside, just let him loose. So,
yeah,
stuff like that.
More This could be skin issues, his anger from that.
Could be. I've never
sadness.
forgiven my dad. I'm just kidding.
Good
I
times.
haven't.
On that note, we love your
Speaking of,
dad.
we do.
We love
Absolutely.
animals.
Yes, for
We
sure.
love you.
We love you. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Steve was fantastic. Great guest. Got a really good feeling from him. So
Yes.
I highly suggest his book. There will be links to how to get to that in the episode notes, along with his websites. Thank you all for listening. If you want to contact us, the Melt Podcast at protonmail.com.
hunter-muse@protonmail.com. Keep those emails coming.
Thank you for listening. Spread us far and wide, and great stuff coming down the pike. So
Yep.
thank you all so much. Much love.